Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Here.
Mr. Brown?
Here.
Mr. Jacobson?
Here.
Mr. Madigan?
Here.
Ms. Marlin?
Here.
Mr. Roberts?
Here.
Mr. Smite?
Here.
Mayor Preston.
Here. The minutes of February 15th. Is there a motion?
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Smythe, seconded by Roberts. Any additions or corrections? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. Are there any additions to the agenda?
Madam Mayor.
Okay.
Yes, I
Aaron
would like
Ammons.
to add to the agenda a discussion item, the fines or fee for the marijuana violations.
Okay, I'll second your request.
That would be under new business?
Yes.
Okay.
You do.
All right. Is that, everybody approve of that?
Yes.
Okay. All right, now we'll move on to petitions and communications. Durrell Cruz.
Good evening. I think that works. I would like to speak to a non-agenda item, except an agenda item has been added, so it kind of addresses it a little bit. On behalf of the IDOT Traffic Stop Task Force, Peter Resnick presented this final report to the City Council last fall. At that time, the City Council expressed its appreciation to the task force for their time, the dedication, and hard work. You publicly stated you would carefully review each recommendation at future council meetings. After 3 months, it's disheartening to watch the City Council's lack of response. How is your inaction to be interpreted by the public? No serious discussion, no definitive action, just a couple of exchanges involving stops and marijuana possession. The public has started to hear excuses. We don't have the staff. We don't have the money. We don't have the time. This may be true for some of the recommendations, but they ring hollow for others. In fact, some of the least costly and least time-consuming recommendations are critical to future progress to understanding and analyzing traffic stop racial disparities. The Council needs to follow through with its public commitment to address this problem. Otherwise, your words and past actions are meaningless and speak volumes. Therefore, I ask any one of you tonight to get this process started by requesting recommendations 2.3 and 2.4 be put on an upcoming agenda to discuss and approve. They are low cost to implement and nominally controversial, but are critical to the future progress of the city in understanding and eliminating this problem. Here is why these two recommendations need your consideration now. In June, the 2015 State Traffic Stop Data Report will once again be released to the public. The data has been useful but incomplete. More specific local data is needed. Recommendation 2.4 addresses this shortcoming by clearly and unequivocally directing the UPD to collect this local data will ensure that both state and local data can be reviewed together. This data would permit an evaluation of the efficacy of investigatory stops as a crime-fighting tool, a critical deficit in current data available. No statistical analysis needs to be done, no statistician hired, only the collection and reporting of raw data, which also should be of great interest to the UPD. In fact, the UPD has already started this collection process, but needs to be directed to complete the full data collection recommended by the task force. This includes 1, traffic stops broken out into the 3 categories of safety, patrol, and community caretaking by race and gender. The number and percentage by race and gender of each stop that result in the arrest of the passenger or driver. And lastly, if an arrest occurs, why the arrest was made. Was it because of a traffic crime, a warrant arrest, a drug crime, a property crime, a violent or weapons crime? Finally, you should discuss recommendation 2.3. How and who can best review and analyze this raw data and report back to the City Council? It is critical for continuity's sake to have people familiar with, knowledgeable of, and committed to addressing this issue to fulfill this role. I suggest a special committee of no more than 5 be identified to review this data every summer. I believe a
Mr.
City
Cruz, you
Council
have 1
member,
minute.
such as Eric, a representative of the UPD, such as Sergeant Charles, a task force member, such as Peter Resnick, and 2 Urbana community members would serve this role well. It's time for the City Council to put at least these 2 task force recommendations on one of your upcoming agendas so the community can better understand and better address traffic stop racial disparities in the future. Please consider doing this. Thank you.
Eric?
So at the last meeting at which we discussed this, we asked our Human Relations Officer to come back with outlining an approach to deliberating on this and leading to action. And I wonder if we might ask for an update in the very near future, within the next week or two, to us on the status of his deliberations.
Well, we have a meeting scheduled for Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, to talk about it and bring up something to the City Council.
Oh, okay, so the meeting of the Human Relations Commission this Wednesday will...
No, not the Human Relations Commission, the staff person talking with me and Mike Munson and the attorney to figure out, how we're going to respond.
Okay, so when can we expect, how soon after that will we get
Imagine
something?
we could say something at the committee meeting next
Next
Monday.
week? Okay.
Doesn't mean we're going to have a complete study done, but we'll just tell you where we are.
Yeah, I'd really like the status of the thinking on that, and I agree with Darrell that it has been a long enough time to make people reasonably antsy to hear what's going on.
Okay. Did you want to say something else?
Darrell,
about-
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You filed another thing, you wanted to say something about Carl and their levy?
Yeah, I didn't realize that on your last agenda that the attorney was going to speak to the Carl issue. And there's some questions. I've been in conversation with some school board members, and there's some concern that the fact that the levy has been supported by the Fourth Appellate Court to be extended to have Carl and Provena property taxes included on the extension and reducing Urbana citizens' taxes for this coming year. The fact that the question is not settled and that it is likely to be appealed means that those taxing bodies, especially, for example, the school district that has tax caps and limitations of what it can do, it will get its tax levy, but it will get up to $6 million, I have been told, that it will have to put in escrow for the next school year, and they have no way presently to cover that cost in their budget for next year, because if the Supreme Court should rule against it, they have to give the money back. And I assume that's true for the city also. And my concern is whether people are aware of the limbo that this particular course of action might be putting local taxing bodies in next year in terms of extreme financial straits, because even though they're going to get their full amount, they don't have access to the amount now that is produced by the property taxes of the 2 hospitals, because it's still in question. And my question to you is, I've wondered why or who is pushing this to be forced upon the community at this point in time until a final decision is made, because of the complications that it's creating for the community as a whole. And I'm also wondering how the city would handle its revenue that it's acquiring next year. I'm assuming in the past, when the cities had it, they put it in escrow. When the hospitals had it, they put it in escrow. They couldn't use it because there was no final clarity exactly how this was going to work out. So you're going to get this money from Carl and Pravina next year, but you're not going to be able to use it, or if you use it and then you have to pay it back, are you going to raise the tax, because it's going to go back up 11%, are you going to have to raise it more to cover the cost of paying the previous year and where you were at? I just wonder who's thought through this process and how
Mr.
it might be
Cruz,
affecting.
I could clarify it for you.
Okay.
The appellate court ruled that the law was unconstitutional. So
Correct.
that is the law of the land. And then the Board of Review voted to put them on the tax rolls.
I understand.
So something that happens after that, if we get the money, there's no need for us to put it in escrow.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's a decision that a local government would make for itself, but there's no reason to think that they're forced to put it in escrow, because they're
I didn't
not.
say they were forced. I said
Well,
they're
I'm just
taking
saying
the
that would be their
precautions.
decision if they want to be, assume that they're in such terrible risk, but, that's up to them. But the city certainly wouldn't feel, I would not recommend that we put it in escrow. But we don't even know if we're going to get it yet, so we'll see.
Okay.
We'll cross that bridge when we
And
come
I
to it.
just wanted to express that it's been expressed to me, and it's been expressed by school board members to me, and there's some real concerns with that.
Dennis?
And isn't it true that the school board made its own settlement with Carl and was happy to pay future taxes based on that settlement because they got a rebate from the Carl district? So I'm not sure what their problem is. They've already made their decision about the fairness of the taxes. They understood it before.
I would simply say, talk to the school board and ask
You're the
them.
one who's bringing the question
Okay,
to us.
well, I bring it up because I talked to the school board member, and they did settle differently than you did. Yes, they did. But the impact of this particular decision, regardless of how different taxing bodies responded to it in the past, and I don't think it's fair to make that accusation to the school board in light of not knowing for sure what was going to happen in the future, but rather understanding the dilemma that some taxing bodies currently find themselves in because of the ambiguity of the final decision that's going to be made and the impact possibly on our community. And my question is, I understand, my real question is, and I've talked to the assessor, the Board of Supervisors, finding out who pushed to have the decision, the Board of Supervisors do it this year and not wait until the Supreme Court ruled and let it be settled and clear for everybody. I can't get a straight answer from anybody on that particular question. I think the committee needs to be aware there's a lot of unsettled issues that were very clearly talked about by the attorney in terms of some of the settlements of the past, this current situation, and in the future. And I think a lot of the public is just saying, we're getting 11% reduction, we're happy. And I'm happy because that's about $350. But there's a lot of concerns I have with why we didn't wait a year that's going to cause all these problems.
If you get your money, you can put it in escrow.
No, I
Okay.
think it's a matter of
Okay.
the other base.
I think
I'm
Eric
just sharing
Jacobson-
some of the other
Eric
concerns of other
Jacobson
taxing
wants to
bodies.
say something.
Yeah, so I will just go on record. I completely support the actions that we have taken with respect to this.
Okay.
And maybe I'm a little bit simple-minded, but I thought that the law that was passed that made them tax exempt was a very bad law. Therefore, I supported challenging it.
No
We
problem.
obeyed the law as long as the court had not ruled. Now, an appellate court has ruled that the law was unconstitutional and that the hospitals owe the money, and so now we're obeying that law. However the Supreme Court rules, we'll obey that law. But we're behaving in what I think is an appropriately simple-minded way. We're advocating for our rights, and we're obeying the law.
I don't disagree with any of that. That's not what I'm suggesting
Okay.
at all.
I think you've gone past
Okay,
5
well, I'm
minutes,
just saying
but thank you.
it's
Aaron?
understanding the full.
I'd like to have a copy of what you presented, And I think when people are asked questions, I don't know if the 5-minute rule still applies to them when they're answering questions. But I'd like to see what you have presented so that I can continue moving some of this forward, hopefully, that you have raised. And we'll see how it works into what Alex and what the mayor and I guess Mike will be meeting about soon.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. J.B. Curry?
Good evening. My name is J.B. Curry. I am here on behalf of TWG Development, here to speak about the rezone of the 200 South Vine Street parcels. I know I've been here before you before, and a number of you came to visit some of our properties in Indianapolis. Thank you for joining us on that trip. I really appreciate your efforts and energy as you consider this site and us as a developer on this site. I certainly speak in support of rezoning the site for a mixed-use development. We are in the very preliminary stages of what that design looks like and physically is. However, this rezone process is one step in that process, so that's why I'm here this evening. The next steps, in my mind, would be a neighborhood meeting to get input on from the public on the design, feedback that we can get with regards to the surrounding neighborhoods, the aesthetics and the feel and the design of the building. Happy to answer any questions that you have. I'm not really sure how much detail you want me to go into. I know you have the packet of information before you, so I guess I'll kind of open it up.
Okay, Charlie?
JB, thanks for coming. Just real quickly, when you have the neighborhood meeting, which I assume staff will help you set up, will you be bringing some concept designs or just using the stuff that you've shown us in the past?
No, I think concept designs are appropriate. Instead of trying to describe what a certain cast stone or brick or facade looks like, it kind of helps to see other examples, projects that we've done, projects that we haven't done, instead of just talking about something with a blank screen on it. So it'd be a PowerPoint presentation and kind of just walk through a couple of ideas, and certainly happy to entertain any ideas, photos, materials that anyone else would like to present as well.
Okay, great. I assume you'd probably just do the meeting in here too, then we'd have all the facilities, right? Yeah.
Dennis?
Do you have an idea about the timeline you're thinking about to establish that meeting?
You know, that's we've been working pretty closely with staff on that, but in the next 2 to 3 weeks, I would have no problem getting a PowerPoint together of good examples and ideas, and more thoughtfulness to put together in the next 2 to 3 weeks here in March. Absolutely.
I appreciate the fact that you've come tonight. Appreciate that a lot.
Thanks for having me.
Aaron?
Good to see you again, JB.
Yeah.
So this particular project, when you all have worked on other things, not this particular project, but of all the things that you've worked on in different cities, have you had, and I think you answered this question for me once before, but I wanted to make sure about the MBE, VBE goals and stuff like that. So you have no problem working with those types of goals or mandates, right?
No, so we've worked on that in the past in other cities in Indiana as well as Ohio and Iowa. We are actually a step further in a project in Missouri right now where we're going through an open bidding process, working closely with the city to make sure all subcontractors have an opportunity to bid on the projects. That includes calls and emails to individuals of those companies and also public notices in the newspapers as well.
Mm-hmm. So in that process, you just sort of put out, you respond to an RFP, then you sort of put out your own RFP for subcontractors, for minority contractors or women business enterprises?
It would just be us putting out the information and making sure we contact them instead of just floating it around. We try to go out of our way to make sure everyone has a chance to actually know about the project, yes.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes, so that's for contractors or subcontractors, right?
Correct.
What about the workforce? Have you met and have you had similar guidelines or goals for workforce? Just not the contractors themselves, but the workforce on a job.
The actual individuals working on the project.
Yes.
Correct. So we track where those individuals actually come from, where they live from the subcontractors. So sometimes it's tough. You might have a project, in a city, and the subcontractor's located in that city, but the workers actually maybe drive 30 to 60 miles to the job site. That happens very often. So we track all that information. One question I get asked a lot is if we're just coming from Indianapolis, bringing our own workforce, our own individuals. The answer is no. We do have a self-perform arm, so we have about 12 to 14 employees that do some of the carpentry that come from TWG, from Indianapolis, but the majority of the workforce on the site are going to come locally, and we track where they come from. And I can show you that on projects that we've worked on as well.
That would be great. And so I've been privy to some conversations and contracts where those goals were contractors, subcontractors, as well as the workforce. So you're saying that the workforce, you would monitor who the subcontractors are bringing in, and you would hope to work with them to achieve a particular goal if that was a part of the agreement.
Absolutely. So if the MBE goal was 25%, we would try to achieve that goal. Sometimes it's just physically impossible, but we certainly try to achieve that. And then at the end of the project, we would have an Excel spreadsheet breakdown. It would show you the dollar amounts of the budget, where those jobs went, and where those companies and workers are from.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Now, I don't know how detailed you get in monitoring, but as a prime developer, and you bring in subcontractors, and you agree whatever the cost is that you're going to pay them for the work that they do,
Mm-hmm.
do you monitor what they pay?
What they pay to their employees?
Yeah.
I don't believe we do. I can check with our construction arm on
It
that.
was just a question
but-
for my own education.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's something
Okay.
that's...
I don't think we do.
Mhm.
I don't think. I mean, we could pry for that, but that's another company. So
Yeah, I was just asking if there was some way, or if that was a practice. I didn't know if it was or not.
I don't believe it is.
Mhm. Okay. Thanks a lot, man. Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Bishop King James and Reverend Dr. Evelyn Underwood do not wish to speak, but they are on the record as continually concerned about the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer problems. Laura Huth.
Good evening, council members. I am Laura Huth, former city council member, and I am here just to voice my support in favor of the project just north of City Hall here at 200 South Vine. I sent everyone a communication on Saturday with a lot of detail why I was supporting this. It's a project that dates back to my days on city council, and it's actually in the ward that I represented and currently still live in. And I think this is an important project for the neighborhood. It was when we started discussing it back then. It still is today. I've had the opportunity now to talk to the developer on a couple of different occasions, and I have been very pleased with their interactions with the neighborhood, the residents, and city officials that I've had a chance to talk to who have also interacted with them. I think this is a project whose time has come. I think it's an important opportunity for us to add to the tax base and diversity of the downtown of our neighborhood. And I think it's a great project to bridge the downtown of our community with the historic East Urbana neighborhood that lies just to our east here today. It's an important opportunity to form an important relationship with a developer that I think can have long-lasting impacts on our community. So I urge you to support this project in the rezoning that's before you tonight. As this project moves forward, to continue to offer support to make this project a reality. And I will also mention, I'd love to be able to stay and hear this project out, but I'm on the tail end of getting over laryngitis, and so I'm going to go and watch the meeting instead and watch the deliberations there, so I apologize for cutting out.
Okay. Thank you very much. Next, unfinished business. I don't think we have any that we're going to deal with tonight. Reports of standing committees, the Committee of the Whole.
That would be myself. So I have a report of the Committee of the Whole. Ordinances that have been forwarded with recommendation of approval, and I shall read through them. Ordinance number 2016-02-011, an ordinance repealing ordinance number 2015-06055, and amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 22, Section 22-45.1, having to do with municipal gas use tax for the 2016. And for the committee, I move approval.
Second.
Motion by Roberts, seconded by Marlin. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
I'm sorry, I had a quick question. I wanted to make sure that this was the municipal, I was a little confused about this.
This is the gas use tax, which is on large natural
That's
gas
what I thought. I just wanted to make
users.
sure I was clear on that. Thank you.
Mr. Emmons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
No.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries.
Next is ordinance number 2016-02-012, an ordinance revising the fiscal year 2015-2016 annual budget. And this has to do with PSEBA benefits, bond proceeds, parking fund rebudgeting, and the purchase of gas masks. And for the committee, I move approval.
Second.
Motion by Roberts, seconded by Ammons. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Emmons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries.
Next comes ordinance.
Actually, I should have voted on
Mayor
that,
Preston
too.
on this?
Yes,
Yes,
and the motion still carries. Thank you.
it didn't change, did it? Okay. Ordinance number 2016-02-013, an ordinance approving a redevelopment agreement with Central Illinois Soccer Enterprises, LLC, located at 2400 North Willow Road, and known as Soccer Planet Expansion. For the committee, I move approval.
Second.
Okay, motion by Roberts, seconded by Madigan. Any comments? Diane?
I just want to say I think this is a terrific proposal. We approved the first redevelopment agreement here in 2011, and they're now more than doubling in size. And this is a great example of an existing business growing and expanding here in Urbana and serving a need for the sports. It's really sports tourism, and it's a regional draw. So this is a great project.
It's also a good example of how we use TIF.
Yes.
Okay, would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries.
Next comes a resolution, 2016-02-007R, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of a promotional and marketing agreement for the annual Urbana Sweet Corn Festival. And this would be with the Urbana Business Association for the calendar year 2016. And for the committee, I move approval.
Motion by Roberts, seconded by Smythe. Any discussion? Mr. Ammons?
I was just wondering, we talked about the marketing and agreement, and I believe, keep forgetting your name, I'm sorry. Harris. I just had a quick question, if you wouldn't mind. So I know we talked a little bit, well, extensively about the marketing approach and stuff like that, and you said you were going to look into some other areas of marketing, and I was trying to see if you actually had a chance to do that. Some of the radio stations, I mentioned in particular WBCP, and some of the other radio stations to diversify the target audience. Have you had a chance to do that?
Yeah, I have a meeting set, well, we're kind of back and forth, but with 105.5 out of Decatur, and then I'm still working on it, but I know there's a lot of different avenues that I can take. So like I am looking into, you know, diversifying the radio stations that we're advertising on, especially for Sweet Corn, because we can bring in, you know, a lot of different people from surrounding areas.
So I know that 105.5, there was some discussion about it not necessarily being a local audience that you would get solely, because it goes into Decatur as well. And was there any follow-up, an opportunity with WBCP with Mr. Pirtle?
I have not contacted them yet, but on the list to contact. And I know when we originally, my first presentation was regarding just overall marketing for the UBA, and then my second one was regarding Sweet Corn directly. So I'm working on both avenues of that.
And for this one is for the Sweet Corn, all right?
Correct. Yeah, that what we're talking about now is Sweet Corn.
Right.
Correct.
So it's extremely important from my perspective, and I think from a diversified perspective, that in essence, it's really difficult for me to support this unless I know that you are actually actively pursuing that option to reach out to WBCP as well as other radio stations to try to diversify in the marketing approach. So you're telling me today you're definitely going to do that, and WBCP you'll be using taking advantage of the opportunity to market with WBCP as
Yeah,
well.
I could definitely look at what opportunities they have, and if it's within budget and the best interest financially for us, that is definitely something that I could look at. And like I said, as far as 105.5, her first opportunity to get over to Champaign isn't until the first week of April, so we have something, we're working on a date for the first week of April.
Well, I'm not so happy with 105.5 lately because they moved Steve Harvey Morning Show and replaced it with something called The Breakfast Club. While I'm fond of a certain group called The Breakfast Club, I'm not so fond of that group, of The Breakfast Club. And so WBCP is much more important to me.
Okay.
But thank you. I appreciate you answering the question.
Absolutely.
I will add that the WBCP tends to be pretty affordable.
Okay.
I've used them in the past.
Any other questions?
Okay, we have Eric Jacobson?
Purely from a business point of view, BCP will be a good reach for you.
Okay. I appreciate that.
Okay, we have a motion by Robert, second by Smythe, and Diane wants to say something.
I just had a question. Can you remind me, this current contract has a clause in it that says if you need to make something like $10,000 net revenue in order to get the extra $5,000 from the city. Was that in the contract last year?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
it's the exact same contract as last year.
So
I did look over it.
Okay, so since the Sweet Corn Festival actually had a net loss last year, you didn't get the extra 5?
No,
right?
it's if we do have that loss, and then we do get the extra 5. So we did end up getting all 15 this previous year.
Oh, I read it to mean if you made that benchmark, you would get the extra. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Okay, would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries.
Next, we have resolution number 2016-02-008R. It's a resolution declaring an intent to reimburse certain redevelopment project costs. This has to do with Urbana Central TIF District. And for the committee, I move approval.
Second.
Motion by Roberts, seconded by Jacobson. Any discussion? Mr. Ammons?
So if I'm correct, this is the TIF that would be for the sort of Main Street area of downtown, right?
Okay, Brandon Boyce will answer your question.
Yes, the proposed TIF would include Main Street in the downtown area between roughly Vine and about to Strawberry Fields, I'd say.
And so I just had a general question about TIFs. Are we allowed to set particular goals as it relates to economics and I would say diversity goals, or just are we able to set particular goals for particular businesses? Are we able to use the TIF in that regard? And I'm speaking specifically for diversifying the opportunities for businesses and the usage of the TIF funds.
We certainly can utilize TIF to meet many different kinds of goals, including diversity goals, but we have to be careful that I don't believe TIF becomes a tool that we can set goals for existing businesses within that area necessarily. So I think we have a good deal of latitude in how we go about with the goal setting and the redevelopment plan, but I would need to check with our consultant to see if there's any limitations to that.
Eric?
Maybe I'll say something and you can tell me if I'm right. I would think that any sort of diversity goal with respect to either economic class or ethnicity or racial identity, as long as it was a reasonable proposition that the TIF would be used to increase the value of the property and thereby increase the tax revenue from it, that those as long as those other goals were consistent with that, I would guess that they would be allowable. Am I reading the situation right?
I would assume the same, and assuming those goals are also concurrent with our other plans and goals for the downtown and our comp plan, et cetera. I believe so, and we certainly can have more discussions about what the goals will be when we discuss the actual draft redevelopment plan.
So just to follow up, my concerns or my, I guess, desire is to see how, looking at the landscaping and how TIFs have, as far as what I can see, been very beneficial to certain developers or to those who, I guess is a very class-driven argument or proposal that TIFs are designed to address blight and different things like that, but it also seems to be used to generate more development in like a downtown area and stuff like that. So I thought it would be reasonable to propose any of these projects that especially something like a apartment complex would include, things like affordable housing and would have MBE and VBE goals and stuff like in it, so that the tax dollars that are being generated will actually be able to address the concerns for the entire community and not necessarily just a section of downtown or something like that. So in particular, I thought the TIF dollars could be used to address some of the issues we have with contracting and developing and stuff like that, with having particular goals added to them.
Okay, I don't know who's first, Charlie or Diane? Who had their hand up first?
Probably Diane.
Such a gentleman. Can you remind us what the process is for creating this redevelopment agreement? At what point does the public get input on this? Does the council get input? What's the process?
I'm not well versed on the individual steps, but our consultant has sent a person up from St. Louis who is reevaluating the properties within the TIF with the help of city staff. So that actually started today, and they'll hopefully conclude that work tomorrow. So we have to assess every property within the TIF for its eligibility for the establishment of a TIF, and then we'll have to create a draft redevelopment plan. And so, of course, we're taking notes on everything that council's asked for so far, and including the last meeting, in addition to your other questions about TIF, the past performance of TIFs, and then some specific questions about what's been proposed here. So we hope to be able to make additional presentations to you on that information as well. Ultimately, there will be between 90 and 120 days, depending how days of the week fall, of public noticing periods associated with the creation of the TIF. Council has to both accept the redevelopment plan. So you would, of course, review the full document. The document would be on public display. And you also have to initiate the TIF district as well. So there's multiple actions that'll be required during that time frame.
Okay, Charlie?
Yeah, and we do have city goals where the issues that Aaron has raised are stated, and I would hope that that be a good starting point for the goals, that those goals that stated in the city goals, that the goals for the TIF redevelopment that are stated in city goals get incorporated into and serve as a guide to the agreement.
Bill?
Yeah, I think I asked 2 weeks ago if you had a figure for the base EAV of the map as it's drawn now. Did you get a chance to do that?
Yeah, sorry, I did not.
Okay.
And our
But you're also-
consultant was traveling on the road
It
today.
also sounds like maybe this map could change a little after your evaluation of the properties.
Yes, the way in which it could change is, generally at this point, it's not a good idea to add areas, but there may be scenarios in which we would want to eliminate properties, primarily if once we do more detailed cost estimates or projections for the impact on TIF 2. TIF 2 has a burden that it needs to continue to pay off our debt that was used for the Boneyard Creek improvement and Race Street and Broadway Avenue. TIF 2 has to continue to carry that debt service, and we will do detailed projections before enacting this. If for some reason that comes in closer than we would have liked, then we would want to look at taking some properties out of consideration for the new TIF and keeping them in TIF 2.
Okay. And I did do kind of a rough estimate, and it looked to me like the new TIF would be a little bit less than half of what the combined TIFs are now. So we would be downsizing our TIFs, basically.
Yes, I think that's accurate.
Has there
Aaron?
been a, I think we talked about this, and you just mentioned it in addressing Diane's comments about the past performance of TIFs and stuff like that. Do we have that yet as how each TIF performed as to how much it brought back and what the value was for the city?
We can pull all that together and make another presentation to council. There's more to the story than just EAV performance. As we were just discussing, there's many reasons why communities go about the creation of TIF districts, so we want to make sure that we're giving a full representation of the performance of those TIFs. And unfortunately, we don't have many staff who were around in the early days, especially of TIF 1 and 2, which are the primary ones we're concerning. So we want to reach out and make sure we get the full story of what needs those TIFs are addressing.
Okay.
Yes.
Go
No,
ahead.
go ahead.
You
No,
want-
that's
or
fine.
something else? We have a motion by Roberts, seconded by Jacobson. There's no other comments. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries.
Okay, next we have another resolution number 2016-02-009R, a resolution in support of a sustainable 911 funding. This comes from the Mayor Pressing. For the committee, I move approval.
Okay, motion by Roberts, seconded by Smythe. Any discussion? Mr. Madigan?
I just wanted to say that I support the mayor's effort, mainly because this was approved by voter referendum. So you're talking about something it's an increase, but it's voter approved, and it's for public safety, and I think that's important. So I'm supportive.
And the other Mike Madigan is also supportive of that
No,
viewpoint.
I'm the other Mike Madigan.
Oh,
so
well, here, he's the other Mike
help me with
Madigan.
my branding, please.
Okay, well, sorry about that. But anyway, okay. That's a motion by
Myself.
Roberts and seconded by Smythe. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries.
Okay, next comes Resolution 2016-0002. I'll do it again. 2016-02-010R, a resolution in support of increasing the gasoline tax. And for the committee, I move approval.
Okay, motion by Roberts, seconded by Smythe. I'll just give you a little background, if you would, if somebody else wants to take the chair. You want to take the chair, Charlie?
Mayor?
This is from the Metropolitan Planning Council in Chicago, and they talked about the need to raise the gas tax. It was established at 19 cents 25 years ago. And 25 years ago, 90% of our roads were in good condition. Right now, it's about 79%. This would be state roads. And in 5 years, the projection is that it's going to be down to 62%. So it's very hard to finance maintaining roads at a fee that was established in 1991. And so this means that in real terms, because of inflation, people are paying less for the tax, in the value of $1. And yet the cost of improving the roads or maintaining them has gone way up. So that's the argument behind this effort.
Questions for the mayor, of the mayor? Eric?
So I spoke and voted against this resolution last week. I do want to modify one thing that I said. In the interim week, I commented on the fact that the tax was regressive, and Bill Brown sent me some a pointer to some arguments that maybe the gas tax isn't regressive, and so I actually did my nerdy thing, and I went into the economics literature, and it turns out that it's at least debatable, and it depends on the structure of the population and whether you're in an urban area where people at low income levels don't even have cars, etc. So I did want to revise my remarks to the point that I still believe that in our community it's a regressive tax, but that's it. I want to say that that's at least debatable. And I also want to say, as I said before, that I'm totally in favor of reducing our use of fossil fuels. And if you asked me if I favored a national carbon tax, I would definitely say yes. But here's my problem with the resolution. I think that when we admonish other units of government to do things, and there is no reasonable prospect that this admonition will have significant effect, I think that we're diluting the effectiveness of our voice. For example, we did pass a resolution that, with respect to criminal justice, that was transmitted to the county board, that I think was one of the strong voices that resulted in the withdrawal of the proposal for a $32 million bond issue for a new jail. That was a case where, yes, it really was appropriate for us to pass a resolution and transmit that. I just don't see the same kind of potential for impact of this resolution, so I will again vote against it, probably futilely, but we'll see, or maybe not. Maybe I'll convince one other person.
Okay, Charlie, would you take the chair?
Yes, Mayor.
I would like to point out that this does affect cities because we get state motor fuel tax. So even though you might not get it done this year, I think what I'm trying to do is get many cities involved in talking to the legislature so that they will listen to what our problems are. And certainly one of the big arguments for improving the roads is the basic role that transportation plays in the economy, and the need to have good transportation if you want to grow jobs. And that's pointed out also in this little piece that was written by the president of the Metropolitan Planning Council in Chicago. So, I mean, just because there aren't every social effort starts out being a minority until you get a majority. So,
I have a question for you, Mayor.
Okay.
Are you actually talking to like the Illinois Municipal League or something like that as well?
I'm talking to the Illinois Municipal League, but I'm also talking to individual cities, because I think the most powerful thing for a legislator is to hear from the people in their district.
So
I'm
is
trying to
this
do it
a
that
model
way.
resolution then that you're passing around to these other
Yes,
cities? Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
But first I have to get it through my own city, or I'll have no credibility. Okay, I'll take it back.
Okay.
All right.
Then I want to counter Eric.
Okay, Mr. Smythe.
Yeah, well, I think that the issue of getting a group of people together is the questions I just asked the mayor, and her answers point exactly to why we need to start a process. And yeah, we're one voice, one small voice at the moment, but it can magnify. We did it with the water, with the protecting the Muhammad Aquifer. And so it began with a few small voices, and it grew larger and larger. And if it's not this kind of a tax, it needs to be some kind of charge on carbon, as you've said. And like I said last week, this is the closest thing we have to a carbon tax. So I'll take this for now and keep pushing for a carbon tax in the future, because I think that's ultimately where we want to go. So, but this is the best thing we have now, and it's it's proven to help us build roads and repair the infrastructure. And really, repairing the infrastructure we have now should be the #1 priority.
Aaron?
So if we were to support something like this and it grew into this big organized effort and resulted in an increase at the state level, how much does that mean for the city of Urbana?
We would get whatever our share is. I'm not talking about some huge increase, but we would get an increase. And we're sort of really letting everything deteriorate in this state right now, and to say that we're going to go from 90% decent roads, decent state roads, down to 62% is not good. It hurts everybody.
So it seems to me that this is I understand how things percolate up from the ground up through to whether it's city council, to the state, or to federal. But certainly I think that there's, well, if anything's getting done in Springfield, maybe at some point this would be, I just kind of think that our focus at this point should be Urbana, as it relates to our roads and things like that. And I'm concerned about us dealing with that. I'm hitting big potholes daily, which affects my vehicle, my financial situation when I have to get a new tire alignment, every week. So, I thought it was best for us to, not every week, but you know what I mean. So, but there's some rough patches on several streets that I drive, and I would like to see us focus on something more immediate. And I had floated this idea once before about why wouldn't we consider a bond of some sort and use our motor fuel tax to pay back that bond, so that we could actually put $5 or $6 million worth of work onto our own roads and use the current tax base that we have to pay it back over a protracted period of time. So, and this, to me, it is another tax on poor people, and I cannot support it. So.
Diane?
Well, I had to refresh my memory on what this resolution actually said and what we're voting on, and basically we're asking two things. We request that the Illinois legislature carefully consider the costs and benefits of increasing the gasoline tax at the state level, and basically the same at the federal level. So the wording on what's on our agenda here isn't actually as accurate as it could be, because we're simply asking for somebody to have a discussion at both the state and federal levels to start addressing the issue of our crumbling infrastructure. So I'm going to support this because I think they have to be talking about this. I'm not very hopeful that anything will happen, but this is asking them to at least consider the costs and benefits. And we can consider lots of action at the local level, at our own municipal level as well. But I think the discussion has to be held. And I believe at least one presidential candidate, maybe two, have been talking about addressing infrastructure needs, and that's going to be, they're going to be talking about a revenue source as well for that. So anyway, that's what we're voting on tonight, is considering the costs and benefits, not necessarily even staking out a position at this point.
Okay, Bill, did you want to say something?
Sure. Just in terms of regressivity, I think this is probably less regressive for our local area than the 911 tax. The phone tax would be if it was actually implemented, $1.50 per phone, whether it was a landline or cellular, because some people have several phones, some people have prepaid plans. I don't know if the same tax would apply to prepaid, where you're only paying $10 or $12 a month usually. But that'd be a high tax, and a lot of students that don't own cars would be paying the phone tax, assuming they have their phone bill sent here, I guess. But the other thing with the gasoline taxes, locally we host a lot of people on our roads, and this helps. It would help help them pay for our roads, basically, without us having to raise individual city taxes. It would still be a state tax, but allocated by where they buy their tax. So there wouldn't be any disincentive for them to buy their tax locally, but we would get more revenue for their use of our roads. So it makes sense in that respect. But ultimately, we don't have a lot of choices as far as non-regressive taxes as a municipality. It's not like in Indiana where they have income taxes that each many counties have their own income tax in Indiana. So you know, if that's something the state legislature would consider sometime, maybe we could think about that and talk about that too, which would be a less regressive tax.
Okay, would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
No.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
No.
Mr. Madigan?
No.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries. Thank you.
And that ends the committee of the whole agenda.
Okay, reports of officers. We have an annual report from Community Development with Libby Tyler.
Before we start the business and development report, I wanted to let folks know that we have rescheduled the Researching Your Old House workshop. It was snowed out in its previous schedule, and it will be coming this Thursday, March 10th, again at the Urbana Free Library from 7 to 8 p.m. Presenters are Brian Adams and Alice Novak, who's the chair of our Urbana Historic Preservation Commission, and this is sponsored by the City of Urbana and the Preservation and Conservation Association of Champaign County. Also, before too long tonight, we'll be hearing a report from our planner, too, Jeff Engstrom, and I'm sorry to report that this will be his final presentation to the City Council because Jeff has accepted a position with the City of Austin, Texas, in their planning department and long-range planning, and Jeff has been with us for over 10 years, so we're really sorry to see him go. We'll be saying goodbye to him informally this Friday from 4 to 6 at Pizza M, if you're able to come. So thank you very much, Jeff.
What time at PCM tomorrow? 4, you said?
4 to 6 on Friday, yeah. Okay, so we've included a new form of report that Brandon Boys and Libby Horwitz have been working on, which is an annual report of business and development activity for the city of Urbana, and Brandon will be presenting that to you.
So council received the full report in your packets. Council received full reports in your packets. So I'm just going to touch on a few highlights. This new format is it's intended to go along with the updates to the format that you've seen in the monthly reports to council. And in general, once again, we're trying to draw more broadly upon the many different activities in the Community Development Department and the city that relate to business and development, not just activities of the Economic Development Division. Libby Horwitz, our Economic Development Specialist, put a lot of work into this, and we really are interested in your feedback on the style of the reporting, the metrics, things like that. You don't necessarily have to share that tonight if you don't want, or you want more time to think about it, but please feel free to email or call afterwards. I won't read the forward, but I would just say we've had a very productive year, and we've had a year in which we've laid the groundwork for many of the things that we're now discussing and will continue to be discussing in 2016. With regard to new business in the city, this is not a truly comprehensive list of all the new businesses in the city, because new businesses happen all the time and we aren't always fully aware of them. But we did have a very strong concentration of new businesses in our downtown in 2015, approximately 19 new businesses. I'll mention many of these again, but the revitalization of Strawberry Fields after about 4 months of closure, being purchased by Muhammad Al-Hiti, who also owns the International Food Store in Champaign, World Harvest, thank you. Lace's Kansas City Barbecue opening downtown. You know, we need more competition among barbecue restaurants, I think, in general. Yeah, but a welcome addition. Best of Africa Food Store, multiple new collab tenants. In late 2014 and into 2015, we saw expansion of tech offices as well on upper stories. So there's been an increase in employment on Main Street as well that isn't all entirely visible. And then on the periphery of downtown, we've seen a good concentration of increased occupancy at 5 Points with the addition of the second strip. And then a couple new businesses up on North Cunningham, notably Urbana Boulders, which fully renovated an outlet building at Northgate that hadn't been used for some time. So there's that complete list. We have a quote from one of our business owners who's bought the record store that had opened in 2014 and rebranded it. And you know, I think that there is a tangibly different feeling, I think, in downtown than there was 1 or especially 2 or 3 years ago. We've seen a lot of improvements and a lot of increase in activity. So some of the big development activities that have happened and are underway now. The Stevens Building, if you'll recall, that'll be 4 luxury apartments on the second story. That building's been vacant for some time, and we're very excited that it's renovated. The city has a redevelopment agreement for the renovation of that property. 204 West Main Street, which opened late in the season in 2015, so we didn't get to see Sip Yard and the outdoor market really in full swing, but we expect we'll be seeing that in the spring and summer of this year. The 200 South Vine Street RFP, we've now selected TWG Development, and we've been making lots of forward progress on that. The North Crane Alley RFP is still active, and we do have interested parties who we've been in contact with. So we hope that we'll may be able to make an announcement this year. Campus Circle, of course, is now open for showing rooms. I don't think they're fully open yet, but they're well underway. That was approximately $30 million project. And it's one of the projects that's changing the the corridor of University Avenue. And I expect that's only going to continue. 401 North Broadway in downtown, we've entered that development agreement. There's still conditions precedent to that agreement taking effect that need to take place, but hopefully those will be all tidied up in the next couple of months, and we'll have an activation of the Boneyard. Highland Green, the developer was selected for Highland Green in 2015. That would be a major residential development, an affordable development that has been a goal for a long time. The Hanford Inn has been fully demolished. We're no longer plagued by complaints or police calls to the Hanford Inn. It's been responsibly demolished and is now being marketed. And that also was, of course, a redevelopment agreement that allowed that to happen. We are in a redevelopment agreement at 129 North Race. That is, there's been plans submitted for Cherry Tree Cafe to go in there. So there is an anchor tenant that's been established, and hopefully we'll see work underway soon. 901 Western is the second major multifamily apartment building that we've seen. It's very visible on Lincoln Avenue. So we are getting our share of the new student residential construction. At Main Street Plaza, that's the space next to Lacey's, and that building went through a change of ownership. It's had the facade improved in 2015. In addition to the record store changing hands, we've seen the comic book store, the skate shop, and now the CU Adventures in Time and Space, which is an escape room. So that space is now fully occupied by multiple businesses. And we're just seeing a lot more activity in this part of downtown. 108 West Griggs is where Best of Africa is located, and there is interest in having a brewery at that location as well. Again, that would be between 401 North Broadway and 108 West Griggs. Those two properties would really surround the new Boneyard Creek area and allow for a lot more activity in that area. And I mentioned Urbana Boulders before. That was a couple of students, and they raised about $40,000 through crowdsourcing online, which is exciting. And I guess I would mention, too, if you saw in the paper over the weekend, Mike Kulas, the former president of Volition, is now in Urbana and is also doing a Kickstarter campaign for a new video game that harkens back to one of the first games they did and that led to the creation of Volition. I'd encourage you to check that out. It's one of those interesting things that just happened in our downtown, and it's a good example of the kind of innovation that spontaneously happens in this community. Going back to the report, as you can see on those two charts showing the annual square footage added for both commercial, industrial, and residential, you can see that we are at two new peaks. So we're seeing some of the most activity in 2015 that we've seen in quite some time. And so we expect that trend to continue to go up, especially with the new enterprise zone, which of course was a major accomplishment that went into effect in 2016, was born from the fruits of a lot of folks' labors in 2014.
Brandon?
Yeah.
Can you explain what SFR square feet and MFR square feet are?
Single-family residential and multifamily residential. And so I think the multifamily, we're seeing a more pronounced number there through those larger student housing apartments. And we're hoping and particularly, we're hoping Enterprise Zone is going to help with single family. So I already talked a little about the Enterprise Zone, and that is expected to be a major. We won't really see the effects of that for a few more months, but we will be making some more announcements on that soon with regard to marketing of the program. TIF districts, of course, we spent a lot of time working on the initial groundwork for the proposal that the council was able to vote on tonight. And then, of course, the Boneyard Creek was officially opened in the spring with the first annual Boneyard Creek celebration, which will be repeated this year. And we're hoping to see lots more active and vibrant uses of that great city and civic space. And here's some additional city initiatives that are also really important but might not be as visible. The city received, or community development received, about $500,000 in the blight reduction program. And I'll let Libby jump in if she wants to talk any more about this. We're really only getting started with the demolitions at this time, but this was a very significant boost to Grants Division's ongoing efforts to address blight in neighborhoods and building safeties as well.
So we've demolished 3 out of 15, so we're on track. And some of these were longstanding problematic homes and neighborhoods, and this funding source has given us the ability to move those forward and position them for redevelopment, working in conjunction with Habitat for Humanity.
And planning staff made significant progress on the downtown design district in 2015. It's been a lot of behind-the-scenes work, I think, but we'll just have to find a way to go on without Jeff Engstrom helping us out. In addition, also the subdivision ordinance has been a lot of work's gone into that. Public Works, planning, legal, and both the downtown design district and subdivision ordinances will ideally be enacted yet in 2016. We continue with a lot of business outreach, and then business outreach takes many forms because community development does many different kinds of projects that require outreach to businesses, as does Public Works, such as through the MCOR project. We also partner with the Economic Development Corporation for regular business outreach to our major employers. I mentioned a brewery before, and I actually should also mention the Riggs Brewery is planned to go in out at the former TK Wendell's facility out in southeast Urbana. So that's another exciting business that's underway. Hopefully be getting open this year in 2016. But both those microbreweries wouldn't really be possible if council and legal and other city staff hadn't taken the time and effort to establish new liquor licenses for microbreweries. And lastly, in addition to the organic public space activation that we're seeing, and particularly in the downtown area, the city itself continues to sponsor and support a number of events, and also through our sponsorship of the Urbana Business Association to try to activate these spaces. The Public Arts Program did the Boneyard Festival, did a first annual art expo at the Civic Center, the downtown food truck rally, of course the market at the square every Saturday, the indoor markets during the off seasons, and many more events. And that's really just a quick overview of all the things that happened in 2015, and there's many more to come. Are there any questions?
Questions for Brandon? Dennis?
I just wanted to say that one of my favorite expansions in the downtown is the Community Center for the Arts, the C4A expansion of the music school. Robin Curtin and her crew there done a great job and are expanding that music school into like now to completely fill the corner building that had been Carson's Music. Mm-hmm. And of course, that's a great cultural as well as economic improvement in the downtown.
Mm-hmm. And they also do the Ray Street Bash every spring, and
yes.
I would hope with the expansion of their facility comes an expansion of that event too.
Eric?
Sometimes people make invidious comparisons between us and our neighboring city. But I want to say that our apartment development on University Avenue looks a lot better than that Stalinist apartment development on the other side of Wright Street. I don't know how much of that was because Dennis looked sternly at our developer and said he wanted it to look good, but whatever it is, I think that is looking, among all the other things that have been going on, I think that's looking good.
I think the setback looks much nicer than having it right on the sidewalk.
Yes, the
I
setback
commented
makes a
to
big
the
difference, yeah.
realtor, but he had done both projects, so I had to tone it down. Dennis and then Aaron.
So it's always a great thing to help guide development and to bring to it the highest qualities that we can. And I really didn't have very much success in impressing the developer because the design had already been set. But yes, we do love green space around our buildings. I think it makes it somehow, not only is it a large building, but it also allows it to have a green footprint, which I think is such a valuable thing. So let's continue to be vocal and thoughtful and stress the art aspect as well as the engineering and economic aspect of our projects.
Okay, Aaron?
So, yeah, I too would agree with you, Mayor, that I thought, I was just commenting to my son, Amir, that I thought the apartments in Champaign were far too close to the street. It just didn't seem right for them to be that close, so I appreciate the setbacks as well. It's nice to see the businesses that have opened. It's nice to see 5 Points moving in the direction that it is. I've been to the African food store. We were planning to go rock climbing. I know Alex, one of the gentlemen who did the Urbana boulders. I'm just a little afraid to fall right now. Even soft landings are not good for us older people. So I'm still looking forward to Costco's, though. I'm still looking forward to a large employer coming to town to generate lots of jobs. But thank you. I appreciate the presentation.
Diane.
Well, thank you for the new format. It's very useful. One thing I was curious about, for example, on page 5, which I'd find interesting, would be if these businesses that are listed here have received an incentive, it'd be nice to know what this, public investment in the business was, and also the number of employees at each of these businesses. I was curious as to what the total number there were. And at least one of them is actually just a relocation. Urbana True Tire moved from next door to us up to North Cunningham, so it's technically not a new business. It's in a new location, but...
Yes, that's true. It was an expansion, though, so I think there's actually more than one expansion on there, too.
Yeah, Illinois American Water is probably another relocation, too. But anyway...
Yeah, consolidation.
Yeah, the information on employees and what the public investment in these would be useful.
Yeah, we could include those on a future council update.
And maybe use less brown ink on the back. It's pretty, but it's a lot of ink. Right.
Okay, Mike?
I had some similar questions to Diane's, and one in addition was, I noted that at least a small handful of these, and maybe more, are filling spaces that were previously occupied by going concerns. So, of course, it's very important that those spaces are being refilled, don't get me wrong, but it would be nice to know that too. Is this a completely new business in a new space, or is it a business that is occupying something that has been recently vacated by another business? Breathe Spa would be one. Strawberry Fields, arguably one, although it was several months in the interim. But just another thing to kind of look at in terms of gauging, are we gaining, or are we holding ground? You know what I mean?
Yeah, if we designated which businesses were new to the market.
Well, yes and no. I guess what I'm getting at too is, so Strawberry Fields gets filled, Mohammed fills it, but it's
filling
a new and improved and an upgraded version of Strawberry Fields. So it's holding ground. So I don't know how to quantify that, but it might be an interesting thing to kind of look at, just to know, are we adding or are we holding?
Okay, Libby, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I think it's good to see the reoccupancy, and I think probably what would be good to track if we can, although it's difficult, is vacancy rates, because clearly they've been going down. Occupancy's gone up, and I think that's another indicator. But I think identifying which are new and which are expansions and which are just replacing vacant space, but it's the space, especially in the downtown, is turning, it's getting refilled much quicker. And one thing that's interesting is you see underutilized or maybe space that's been vacant being repurposed and reoccupied. And that's probably the most impressive trend in the downtown, which, after all, it's already built for the most part. We don't have that many vacant sites. So I think it helps to see these buildings become completely occupied and to see that high level of occupancy and a reduction in the vacancy rate. We'll
Yeah,
see what we can do to track that.
I completely agree with that. Reoccupying existing space is hugely important, especially places like the Pines, where we've had some churning there. But yeah, reoccupation is very, very important. But I just wonder if can we track that or track that within your new format somehow. That was my only observation.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I would like to report that the City of Champaign is again going to be the lead agency, and we'll have you vote on this. Illinois American Water is having a rate increase which has to go through the Illinois Commerce Commission. And in the past, the cities have objected to these rate increases, so we've weighed in and hired an attorney. And so we're sharing the cost with Champaign and Savoy and some other cities. So we'll be bringing you the formal proposal. But we do try to work with other cities. Mr. Jacobson.
I'll try not to antagonize anybody.
Okay.
If I can help it.
Is there anyone else who would like to give a report? Okay, Scott Tess is here.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I wanted to note that the Environmental Sustainability Division also has an annual report in your packet tonight. It's a new and expanded version of the report that we provided last year. And I wanted to note on page 3, we were able to see a 5% decrease in our community's greenhouse gases between 2013 and 2015. So we're very pleased to see that. The report is, in its entirety, kind of a top-level look across all of the work that our division does. So we don't try and report every last data point that we have, but rather just hit the high notes and show the trends. I want to note also that one of our greenhouse gas reduction efforts going on right now, Solar Urbana-Champaign, is one contract away from hitting our first benchmark, which is 100 kilowatts of capacity contracted. And when we hit that 100 kilowatt benchmark, all participants in the program, past and future, will get an additional 1% discount on their solar installation contracts. If we hit 150 kilowatts, all participants will get another 1% discount, and 250 kilowatts, yet another 1% discount. So the more people participate in this program, the cheaper the price is. So I'm happy to take any questions on the report that you may have tonight or in the future, and also invite you to the Sustainability Advisory Commission meeting, where we'll be digging into some of the details, especially on the greenhouse gas accounting, in a little more depth next month. Thanks.
Will you be doing this in future years?
Yeah, it's my intention to continue this report format in future years.
So, I mean, the solar incentives, is this the last chance or just the last chance for this year?
This is the last best chance, although we may, depending on the conditions, we may consider running another sale in the future. The reason that this is the last best chance is there are so many different incentives, federal and state, and also our local program that we're stacking together. The federal incentives have been extended, the 30% federal tax credit, but the state procurement of solar renewable energy credits from small systems, such as those that people would install on their own household roof, is a one-time expenditure from the state, and there's no expectation that that is going to happen again anytime soon.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Scott? Charlie?
Scott, I meant to bring you the insert that was in the in this month's power bill. I assume you've seen that, or have you
No, I
seen
haven't
it yet?
seen it.
Okay, yeah, just watch for it. It breaks out Ameren's production by biomass, solar,
coal, nuclear, yeah.
coal.
Mhm.
Coal is 56%, and solar is listed as 0. So
Right.
I assume that. You know, I found that surprising. Wind is listed at 7, if I recall correctly. So would that solar component actually change should systems like this come online across central Illinois?
It could. I don't think that what would be success for our region may not be enough to take that, what is actually, 0.0001 or whatever % for the whole state. I don't know if it's going to tick it up to 1, but we're certainly included in that.
Okay, and then the other thing I was going to send you email, but I might as well say it in public. A lot of kudos to staff for the recycling brochure that got sent around. Very well received. There's some nice traffic on our neighborhood list about it, and constituent number 1 really liked it, thought it was great, and kicked me for not having shown it to her sooner. So it's now on the refrigerator. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill?
Yeah, thanks for all the work on the solar project. I haven't made it to one of the solar power hours yet, but I'm hoping to make it to one. I think I need to check, but I'm not sure that renewable energy credits can actually be used as greenhouse gas emission reduction. And I thought we made that clear in our last plan. But, I mean, it's not really a reduction. The wind turbines that are generating the power in South Dakota or wherever are generating power that we bought, but the people living next to them who thought they were using clean energy aren't really, because they sold their clean attributes to us. So there's no guarantee that there was actually a reduction in emissions. So I don't have it. I wasn't prepared to talk about it, but I'm not sure that you can actually make that claim. So I would check that.
Eric?
So once again, I will rise to challenge Mr. Brown on this point and point out that that when we buy clean energy credits, the more clean energy credits that are bought, the more incentive moves into the marketplace to increase the supply of clean energy. So it really does have an effect, and I think it is appropriate to take the credit for that. Maybe could be an asterisk and a footnote, but I'm not sure that's even necessary. I believe it is appropriate.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other reports of officers? Okay, we'll move on to new business, ordinance number 2016-03-015, an ordinance approving and causing publication of the official zoning map of the city of Urbana, Illinois. And here we have Lori.
While that's loading, it's a fairly large document. I'll give you a little bit of background. Once a year, municipalities in the state of Illinois are required to republish their zoning map, which basically shows every zoning change that had already been approved in the previous year. So that's what we're looking at today. What it shows is 13 rezonings previously approved. Let's see if we can keep Adobe working. 2 subdivisions, one within the city, one without. And that was a minor subdivision within the city limits. 1 vacated right-of-way just north of, well, just in the 700 block of Matthews near Crisis Nursery. And there were no historic landmarks to add to the map. And just to make sure I'm covering it all. Yes, that's pretty much what the map shows. Oh, excuse me, 1 annexation. That was for Stark Excavating on North Cunningham. So that map shows all of those changes that were approved previously. Plan Commission looked at the item on February 18th at their meeting, unanimously recommended that you adopt this map, which shows everything that's already been approved. Your options here, of course, were to approve the map, or if you were to deny it, we need to understand why that is so that we can fix it in order to bring it back to you, because it does need to be approved per state statute by March 31st.
Charlie?
I move approval of ordinance 2016-315, an ordinance approving and causing publication of the official zoning map of the city of Urbana.
Second.
Motion by Smythe, seconded by Ammons. Any discussion? If not, would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobs?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
That motion carries. Thank you. Next, ordinance number 2016-03-016, an ordinance amending the zoning map of the city of Urbana, Illinois to rezone 5 parcels from R5 medium-high density multiple family residential, excuse me, and R6 high-density multiple family residential to B4 Central Business Zoning District.
Thank you, Mayor.
And giving his final presentation.
Not a dry eye in the house.
A lot of pressure on you, man. A lot of pressure.
He's already got another job, so it doesn't matter, right?
So yes, this is a rezoning request by the zoning administrator. There's 5 parcels total. 3 of them are going from R5 to B4, and 2 of them are going from R6 to B4. The properties are owned by the city of Urbana. They're currently vacant. They comprise the eastern half of this block, just north of City Hall, and marked with a yellow hash here. And the entire block, as we discussed earlier tonight, is a redevelopment site that the city has been pursuing for some time. So this is really just kind of a one step, or the first step, in moving this redevelopment proposal along. After this, there will be the designs presented to the community input, and then negotiation of the final development agreements, which will all happen after this. The site previously contained 8 single-family homes, which were in various states of dilapidation, purchased by the city and demolished over the last about the last, 2011 they were purchased in. Or 2010, sorry. Okay. The other half of the site is already zoned B4 Central Business District, and it contains a vacant Urbana Tire building and a city parking lot. So as discussed, the site is the subject of a request for proposal. One was issued in 2011. And then a second request for proposal was issued in 2014, or the process was begun in 2014 and issued last year. And the city is currently in negotiation with TWG Development out of Indianapolis, and J.B. Curry is here. It's still in the preliminary planning stages. But just to let you know, the current zoning of the site as R5 and R6 would not allow for the project as proposed. And it would also the current zoning does not match the future land use designation in the 2005 comprehensive plan for the city. So the city may approve or deny the proposed rezoning. Plan Commission has voted 8 ayes to 0 nays to recommend approval of the rezoning. Just take a look at the surrounding land uses of the site. To the north, there's a vacant lot and a single-family home zoned R5. To the east, there are single-family homes zoned R5 and vacant land zoned R5. All the surrounding land is zoned R5. And to the south, there's a parking lot owned by the city. And Adobe is not responding. So we'll just, I mentioned the zonings already. For the comprehensive plan future land use map, it shows the area as central business for future land use. Let's see, there are several goals in the comprehensive plan related to the rezoning. New development should be compatible with the overall design fabric of the district. Promote a balanced and mixed use of land use to help create long-term neighborhoods that are viable. Promote infill development. Increase the vitality of downtown Urbana as identified in the downtown plan. And create additional commercial areas to strengthen the city's tax base and service base. So all of these goals would be served by the proposed rezoning. Additionally, the site was called out in the 2012 downtown plan as a key redevelopment site, so the rezoning would promote that redevelopment. Just to touch a little bit on the proposed redevelopment, at this time it's anticipated to be a 4-story building, up to 198 market rate residential units, or it could be less if there are walk-up units and townhomes. There would be 5,000 square feet of commercial space, 4,500 square feet of amenity space, 200 below-grade parking spaces, which is important because that would keep traffic from, it would keep cars from trying to park on the nearby residential streets. The total floor area of the proposed development is about 200,000 square feet. So the site itself is just under 80,000 square feet. The proposal would have a floor area ratio of just over 2.5, and that is currently not permitted under the current zoning. So really we need this rezoning to make sure this development can go forward and to match the comprehensive plan. Rezoning to B4 would allow for a variety of commercial uses to be included in the development. In terms of development regulations, the B4 allows for a much higher density, but there are several factors to take into consideration. So for instance, there's no height limit in the B4 district, but there are currently the property with the R5 district, the height limit would be 35 feet. With the R6 district, the height limit is based on the setback. So technically, on the R6 portion, which is the northeast quadrant to be rezoned, technically you could currently build up to 90 feet there, 90 feet tall. But really, in reality, there are economic factors that will limit the height of the any development on the site. There's also protections built into the zoning ordinance. Set yards have to match the yards that they are across from or adjacent to. So while there's no minimum yard for a B4 property that would be on an island on its own, when it's adjacent from an R5 property, the minimum front yard is actually 15 feet. And another factor is this property is owned by the city, so we do have final say over the design of what's to be built on it. In terms of the LaSalle criteria, these are what we examine to make sure the proposed rezoning is legal and constitutional. The first criteria would look at the existing land uses of the zoning and the zoning of the nearby properties. We've discussed those. Basically, the B4 district is generally compatible with these properties as it takes on the same front yards and additional yards if there's to be additional height. The property values, how they would be impacted by the rezoning. Property value would go up. The previous use was 8 houses, so the new use would be a mixed-use development with over 100 units. So that would have a higher impact on the community in terms of property tax receipts and property value for the owner. The extent to which the ordinance promotes health, safety, and general welfare of the public, and the relative gain to the public as compared to the hardship imposed on the owners. So the zoning would not harm the health, safety, or welfare of the general public. It would allow for achievement of a key redevelopment priority in our downtown area. There wouldn't really be parking impacts on the adjacent residents because the parking would be on-site underground. Missing sidewalks along Urbana Avenue and Elm Street, those would be installed to help create or help meet those gaps in our connectivity of sidewalks. And there would be a substantial economic benefit in property taxes and as well for local businesses with a new source of residents so close to downtown. Fifth criteria, the suitability of the subject property for the zone purposes. The property is near downtown. It's on Vine Street, which is a major corridor. It's currently vacant, so it's really set up to be developed as an infill development, which the rezoning would allow for. The final criteria, the length of time the property has been vacant. The properties have been vacant since 2010 when the city acquired them and cleared them. So, options tonight, City Council could approve the rezoning as presented within or herein, or deny the proposed rezoning. Again, there's no conditions on a rezoning, but conditions can be placed on the development agreement, which would come later. Plan Commission voted 8-0 to recommend approval of the proposed rezoning, and city staff concurs with that recommendation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Jeff Engstrom? Aaron?
Will there be like some peach trees planted on the east side of that so I could come over there and eat peaches or something?
I'm not sure if we have the right climate for that. That would be a question for the developer.
No, seriously, would there be some sort of greenery, trees or something? I kind of like the trees in front of the campus circle or whatever it is on University. So I was just wondering if there was going to be something like that to sort of blend into the houses that are east of that.
For the zoning ordinance, there's no requirement for landscaping in this area. But as I mentioned, the landscaping will be part of the presentation to the community when they develop the plans for the building. And that could be something council wishes to include in the development agreement.
Okay, thank you. And good luck, man. Thank you.
Thank you.
For your service.
Yes.
Charlie?
I was going to move approval of this so we can get, make some statements.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion by Smythe, seconded by Jacobson. Any other discussion?
Yep.
Charlie?
So, yeah, I think Aaron hits on the key aspect here. I'm very supportive of the project and the rezoning, but this is only the first step. But the real issue is that we become the arbiters of the design and how it impacts the neighborhood behind here. And so we'll have to exercise appropriate care and work carefully with the development agreement and the developers to ensure that we have a quality project with that facing Vine presents a great business front, a commercial front, but from behind blends in with the residential neighborhood. And I think that's something we can do. We've done it before, and I'm pretty encouraged at this, because ultimately a successful project here goes along with the slow, steady growth of downtown. And if we really truly want to be a viable micro-urban environment, this kind of infill development puts people downtown and takes pressure off of suburban sprawl. So I favor this and look forward to the redevelopment process as the next step.
Dennis?
Yeah, and I appreciate Councilman Smythe's comments and concerns for the appropriate building to be envisioned jointly by the members of the city staff and the council, a very able developer, and input from the community itself. Living 2 blocks from this development, it's going to be a development that I walk past every single day to go into the downtown. I already know that the size of it will. It's difficult to predetermine sort of how the effect of the large building at this site is going to change the personal space concept for those people who live in the East Urbana neighborhood, who migrate back and forth on Green Street so many times. Also, we have Green Street is being used as a major thoroughfare for access into the city building by the police department parking lot, which is going to be a concern for the city, and for I think the police department is going to want to have some input onto that. The only other thing I will say that it might be a consideration. I haven't actually offered this before, but it might be a consideration to make the facade along Vine Street larger and to have it step back somewhat, perhaps 1 floor, along the Urbana street side, because that's how it would be perhaps blending or stepping into the residential area of the neighborhood immediately behind it. So there might be some design consideration for varied height of the floors, from west to east on the building. But those considerations will come in future meetings, and I have a full confidence that we can work through any question that arises. I think that putting the zoning together so that the entire site has the same zoning is the only appropriate thing to do at this location, considering that it is an area that has been targeted for development for near downtown development to expand the downtown of Urbana for quite a number of years. It's in our comprehensive plan, and so I do support this.
Diane?
I just echo everything that's been said. This will be a transformative project. It's up to us to make sure that it meets high standards of quality and is sensitive to the neighborhoods. And I have to say, after touring the projects in Indianapolis and meeting with the developer, I think this is a great choice, great partnership, and I was especially impressed with the long-term view that TWG has taken with the City of Indianapolis in terms of investing in the community and working with the community is shown a real commitment to minority hiring and to technical training and really going beyond what you typically see. So I hope this is the beginning of a beautiful relationship, and I look forward to the next stage of this.
I'm really happy about underground parking. Eric?
I guess one of the things that I feel about this and that excites me about it is that it's really going to make downtown Urbana look more urban. It's going to make us look more like a real city. And that appearance is exciting. I mean, when you go into the downtown of a real city, it's just cool. So, I'm just echoing what everybody else said, just saying slightly different thing about it. But yeah, I'm amped.
Okay. Anyone else? Mike Madigan.
Just real quickly, I would agree. I think it's a very exciting project. The developer is very capable, obviously. I just had one question about the Vine Street setback. We had some discussions about setbacks earlier this evening. So under the zoning, I understand under the development agreement something could be different, but under the zoning, what is a setback on Vine Street?
There's no required setback because it's across from B4.
Okay. Is that something that could be impacted in the development agreement?
Certainly.
Okay, thank you.
All right. We have a motion by Smythe, seconded by Jacobson. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries. And thank you very much for all you've done, Jeff. We appreciate it. Okay, the third item is marijuana. Aaron, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, it's buzzing all over the state and the city, so nobody's in the mood for a little humor, huh? Okay. All right.
We're not chemically primed for it yet.
So, as Mr. Cruz had spoken to earlier tonight, and something that there's been an ongoing discussion here at the city about the disparate impact that the cannabis enforcement has had on the African American community, and just what I feel like is a general consensus amongst the council members that the fine itself is too high in the city, and so as a means also to address that, a fine that I think is exorbitant, also to sort of get this conversation moving on how we can address the disparate impact that we found in the stops and the application of the fines on the African American community. I am asking or moving to bring into council to discuss the lowering of the cannabis possession fine. And I pulled the information that Jim, our attorney, shared with me off an email, and I had it printed up and passed down around to all the council members. And so you have it in front of you. The city code section 1516 provides information for you to look at. And under UCC section 1-18, it says UCC section 1 through 18 provides the city's minimum fine schedule for certain violations. The minimum fine currently set for cannabis possession is $300. Per this discussion, I am asking that we lower that fine to $0.
Well, anybody else have we'll give you a report on what other cities have, and you can talk about it, but somebody else want to comment?
Yeah.
Dennis?
First Eric, then I'll do it.
Eric, okay.
I mean, I'm in agreement with Aaron. I think people know that, or maybe people don't know explicitly, but I would be in favor of legalization of marijuana and this would effectively make it legal in Urbana unless unless the law enforcement officers chose to charge people under the state statute and the state's attorney chose to prosecute them under that, which I think a discussion needs to be underway. The one thing I would point out is that in the 2 states that legalized recreational marijuana a couple of years ago, Colorado and Washington, the recent polls indicate that the approval rating for those laws, the approval rating for legalized marijuana, is now significantly higher than the votes were in favor of the laws at that time. In other words, so in one case, it passed by 55%, and now the approval rating is order of 65%. And whereas 45% were against it before, now it's, down to 30% or so. So the citizens where this happened are happy with the results, and so I know that we'll have a resolution with respect to this on the township meeting, and I think we should pursue this, but I think we have to pursue it together with conversations with law enforcement and together with conversations with the people who prosecute, because in a reform of this nature, I think that has to be a partnership between those of us who make ordinances and those who enforce ordinances and those who prosecute with respect to, under those ordinances or under the state statutes. But I do want to continue this discussion, and I want it, and I hope it'll be. I'm sure it'll be, because this is Urbana, that it will be an evidence-based discussion, and let's. But I do agree with Aaron. I think $300 fine is. I mean, it's probably better than getting charged. Well, yeah, it's probably not better than getting charged with a misdemeanor. It's certainly better than being charged with a felony. Certainly, maybe, although some people, $300 is crushing. So, yes, let's. I mean, in principle, I agree with 0, but I think there has to be a lot of people involved in the conversation.
Are you saying that the state law needs to be looked at?
Well, I think that we ought to explore what we can do as a city and what our local law enforcement and prosecutors are willing to do as a city, especially our law enforcement. I mean, I think Chief Connolly has to be involved in this, and I think it has to reflect, it has to reflect what our police officers will do. One of the concerns that I would have is that if we had no here's the thing I'm concerned about. I'll just say it out. I'm concerned that if we set the fine very, very low, that some fraction of people who would be charged under the ordinance will be charged under the statute. And so I'd like to have an agreement that well, I'd like to have an indication that wouldn't happen.
Dennis?
Yes, Aaron, thanks for bringing this up. Certainly, over the, 40 or 50 years, since the 60s when the use of cannabis was pretty popular and it continues to be so, I've seen numerous lives affected by incarceration. And the fact that the city is still participating in these kinds of interventions into personal lives for a drug that is now pretty much considered to be not the major problem of enforcement community at this time probably brings this point to a valuable discussion. Whether it should be 0 or not, I guess we'll have that discussion. I just like to put into reference as a kind of a way to get your brain larger than and outside the box. I did just recently go to the Art Theater and see Michael Moore's new movie, Who Shall We Invade Next? And the point of his movie is that we should be invading other countries and taking back from them, or capturing from them as booty, some of the best ideas in social and justice and economics and social services that we don't seem to be able to grasp in this country, or at least support. He went to Slovenia, where they have free college education for all citizens. He went to France, where the food is better in the children in the elementary school cafeteria than ever might be seen in most restaurants in America. He went to Tunisia, where women have equality and rights equal to men in every respect of their constitution. And he went to Portugal, where there are no criminal action taken against any drug use. And so when Michael Moore was interviewing the administrators in the city capital of Portugal, he said, "What? Like all drugs, totally equal or totally legitimate to use anything you want?" And he said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, what are the repercussions?" And he says, "Well, people get along pretty well. Of course, now this is a society that isn't quite as well armed as we are. But in one nation in the world, it is not a felony, it's not a misdemeanor, it is nothing to use whatever drug you wish to use in your life." Now, I assume that it's still against the law to rob or to murder or to beat people, but in your own life, you have to be your sole guide and anchor, and that's where it is in that community. If Portugal can go that far, I wonder what we can do. And what have they learned that we haven't seen yet?
Aaron?
So just sort of to continue in that vein, I have been working on this for many years, and I did bring an organization here called Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. So there are lots of folks, even within law enforcement. Eric, you talked about the partnerships, who are current chiefs of police, current DEAs, ex-state's attorneys, current police officers, who have all come to the conclusion that prohibition creates the violence that is wrecking our streets, and the felony convictions that come along with it that hamper employment, which also further enhances the violence on our streets. And that is indeed the prohibition, much like the alcohol prohibition that created the underground market and violence and murders and things that go along with that underground market and that prohibition, which helps create that market. So we have law enforcement agencies within this country, our law officials who have traveled to other countries, who have observed what you were talking about, Dennis, who have seen the impact on the society in a very positive way. And it does not mean that individuals, I should say, it does not mean that it's okay for you to, for instance, operate machinery, heavy machinery under the influence or something like that. And so I'm certainly not advocating that a person should be able to drive their vehicle under the influence of alcohol or marijuana or cocaine or heroin. And I don't think that that those places that you were talking about, and some of the work that I've seen from Neil Franklin at LEAP, they are still cognizant of the impact that it can have on a community, a person who is maybe under the influence of something. And so it does not preclude that person from being subject to the laws of that city or of that state. So after hearing much, I've heard this repeatedly about the partnership between those of us who make the laws or the ordinances and those who enforce them. And prior to me coming here, this council set a fee structure for cannabis because that is our job. If it is our job to set the ordinances and the fees, then it is then the job of the law enforcement to enforce them. So I'm a little concerned to hear that there's some concern that if we set a particular ordinance, that the enforcers will do their own thing and do something outside of what we propose or what we set as the boundary. Now, I do think there should be some conversation with the police department, but as the legislators, if you will, it is our job to set these ordinances and for them to enforce them. So, for instance, I don't think an individual who is caught under the influence of marijuana at this point should not, should somehow circumvent the legal system and not be charged with a DUI. I understand that they will be charged with a DUI. What I've been advocating since we began this conversation is that if a said person is stopped and they are under the influence, then the charge of driving under the influence is still that charge. But if they happen to have 25 grams of marijuana with them, why shouldn't that just be a fine? Why should that also be a state charge if we have an ordinance that says that it can be a city charge? So, like I said, I'm a little concerned that there's any concern that if we decide to do a particular thing, that there would be a response from law enforcement that is to actually exasperate this situation and charge people at the state level if they have not, if they have the same amount that we have in our ordinance. So that's just some of my concerns that I have, and I'd like to see us work out with Chief Conley and the law and the police department. And I know we tried to talk about this once before, but I don't know if we actually got a breakdown for the public and for the council as to where does that $300 go. If a person is stopped and they got a fine, where does that money go? Every single penny of it. Where does it go? Who gets it? Is it the state's attorney's office? Whoever? I don't know. I'm just wondering.
If it's a city fine, it goes to the city.
So we get all of it?
Right.
Okay. And it's not,
And
does the police
basic-
department get a
yeah.
share of it or something, or does it go
No,
into our
we
general coffers?
do not, we do not fund the police department with fines, okay? That goes into the general fund.
Okay.
The issue is, how do we enforce state laws? So we'll bring you some, we're going to be talking about, we'll bring you a report on Monday. But, you know, really, if you're talking about Colorado and Washington, they changed it at the state level. It wasn't cities that changed it. So that's the major issue, is the state level.
You said that we're talking about how to enforce state law. No, I'm not.
Well, that's an issue. So we'll have a discussion at the committee meeting on Monday. Okay.
No, I don't understand what you're saying.
Well, it'll be the beginning of the discussion. We're not going to get this done in one night. So we'll bring you what we come up with this week on Monday. Okay. And we'll discuss it.
So what do you mean? What we'll come up with? Who is we?
I'm going to talk to Alex and Mike Munson, and we're going to and Jim Simon, and we're going to outline what we think the issues are, and we're going to bring it to the council to start the discussion. Okay?
Well,
You want the topic discussed, and it's going to take more than one meeting, but we will start the discussion on Monday.
I guess I thought we were starting the discussion now, because, I mean.
We are,
people
but
can-
you asked for some information, you asked for all kinds of things, and we'll try to answer your questions. And I'm sure there will be more questions.
So I just want to be clear, I asked for two things.
You asked to have it be lowered to 0,
Yes.
and what else did you ask for?
You just answered the question about where the money came from,
Okay,
or where the money goes.
the money goes to the
Right.
city.
So at this particular point,
We can tell you what other cities charge and, you know, what the state thing is, but I
guess
think the
I wanna
basic
be
issue,
clear.
if you're concerned about drug policy, I think the basic issue is state and federal law, because these states are acting in violation of federal law. So we are talking about higher levels of government, that cities can't just do everything they want. We have some leeway on this, but we don't have complete leeway.
And so, if we can charge 300, then we can charge $1, right?
We can, yes, we
Okay.
do.
So
But
I don't know.
whether we
if-
want to charge $1, I don't know. We're going to have to talk about it. And we certainly we're going to have some question on the ballot, so people can weigh in on this. But I think it's a mistake to think everything's going to be solved by the city of Urbana. I think this is a state and federal issue. Dennis?
But I do see that it would be all right to, it would probably be of benefit to put this on an agenda item, Aaron, because then we could actually start to become, we could actually have motions made, but we can't today because it's just really a discussion, which I appreciate having. And we, you know, but you know, the next step would be to bring it into the agenda so that, you know, perhaps you would have a motion perhaps prepared for this council, you know, at that time, and then there could be debate on the motion, and we might actually take an action then. And if we're talking only about the fee that Urbana uses in these actions, that's certainly something that's within our ability to change.
So I guess I expected, or not expected, but thought that there could be somewhat of a robust discussion just based upon that notion alone, whether or not this fine should be lowered. My proposal is 0. I haven't heard from the other 4 council members. What do you think? So I don't know why this discussion about that proposal couldn't take place at this particular moment. Why does it have to wait till Monday? I don't understand.
We can have a discussion, but you can't have action. You haven't put it on the agenda first, so.
I didn't ask for action at this point. I
Okay,
said
well,
my
we
proposal.
will put the, whatever you want to be on the agenda on Monday. You want to say change the fee, the fine? Is that what you want the agenda to be? Or just a general discussion of the whole
No,
situation?
I would like the fine to
Just
be
the
lowered.
fine.
Yeah,
Okay,
I mean,
we'll
there
have
could be a
it- we could
general,
put that
broader
on there.
discussion, but
Just-
that is
we
the
could have,
focal point of my
We could
of
say
my
the
proposal.
marijuana fine for the Urbana ordinance, and then discuss it.
Okay,
And you can have a motion to do what you want, but I imagine it's going to take more than one discussion. Diane and then Dennis.
Well, one thing that's not on here is how much are we talking about? Amount?
We will put it on the agenda to discuss, should we change the fine?
No, I'm asking how much marijuana are you talking about?
Oh, that is defined in the ordinance, right? 30 grams?
Under 30 grams.
Under 30 grams.
Okay, thank you.
Dennis?
Above that, it's a state charge.
And there's no discretion there.
No, we have to follow state law. Dennis?
Yeah, so as my part of my discussion, Aaron, I'll say that I'm totally willing to think about reducing the fee. I think $300 is a lot. But because I just read your paper before we sat down, I'm not really prepared to be intelligent about having a really good discussion with you, because I think I need a little bit more information. That's all.
Anyone else?
Bill.
Bill?
Yeah, last time we discussed this, I said I was in favor of lowering it. I would still be in favor of lowering it. But I haven't thought a lot about lowering it to 0. I think there's a lot of things to consider as far as trying to act in isolation. The fact that commerce in marijuana still causes a lot of problems because it is illegal at the state level, so there's still going to be this underground economy that is not legal and not regulated and can be very dangerous, even if we're talking about a lot of people using small amounts, at some point somebody has larger amounts, and that's illegal, and it can be there can be a lot of financial incentive, as we just saw this past weekend, where people get shot and stuff over relatively small amounts of marijuana, but bigger than 25 grams. So there has to be some thought into what the fine level has to do with that, and also how officers will respond, because currently they have their choice whether to charge under a state statute or a city statute for anything less than an ounce, apparently, and I'm not sure what power we have to change that. So I'd be interested in seeing if we have the authority to say you have to use the city charge rather than the state charge, and so I think there are some trade-offs and considerations. But I wouldn't be prepared to say I'd go to 0 right now.
Anyone else? Okay. Did you want to say something else?
Yes. So, I appreciate that. I'll be happy to see what other information is being presented. I'd just like to be very, very clear that although we sort of broaden this discussion and we start talking about legalization and stuff, all I'm talking about is what we have the authority to address as a city council in relationship to an ordinance that is already on the books and a fine and a fee structure that we have already imposed, which would address what everyone up here knows is a disparate impact on the African American community, right? That's what, and I don't think anybody should pay that much, but clearly it's been demonstrated to us through the task force that was assembled by this body that there's a disparate impact, a substantial disparate impact on a protected class, and we need to do something about that. So we've already been moving slowly to address that, so that's why I propose to put it on as a discussion item tonight. Lastly, as much as I get labeled as anti-police and all sorts of different things, I was not under the impression at all that the Urbana Police Department would do something as vindictive as charge everyone with a state charge because we decided to lower the fee. As an enforcement agency, their job would be to enforce what we put forth. I don't see why they would all of a sudden say that, well, since you guys changed it and lowered it and we don't like it, we're just going to charge people at the state level. I think that would be unprofessional, to say the least of them, to do something like that. Now, I do think that there's, again, a conversation to be had about when individuals are actually under the influence of something like that while driving. That makes sense, but if we set a fine and a fee schedule, then I thought that they would be willing to adopt that. I don't know how it changes their job in any way, shape, or form to charge somebody $300 or $1 if it's their job to just simply enforce the ordinance. And I didn't think that that was something that we had to worry about, but maybe you guys are opening my eyes to something I didn't see. So thank you.
Eric?
Dennis's mention of Portugal sent me into a flurry of searching and calculating. So Portugal annually has 3 drug-induced deaths per million population. The United States has 157 drug-induced deaths per year, per million population.
Charlie?
I wasn't going to add to the complications here, but I've got to say this. Prohibition doesn't work. We know it doesn't work, but these other countries have real social programs. And we need to be looking at that in addition to, as an alternative to prohibition.
Okay, I think we will adjourn if we have no other business. So thank you all.